Oh my goodness, thank you all for coming. I'm so excited that you all showed up for Audre in full force, even though it is what dear friend of Audre Lorde and one of the people I'm most grateful to in the universe, Barbara Smith, calls a recognized mealtime. It is dinner time, and you are here to get fed in a different way, and I take that very seriously. I'm so grateful for Windham-Campbell, everything that I've gotten to experience this week, and also for this miracle, because we just came out of a wonderful session about Jay Dilla, and Jasmine was talking about crate digging as archival work, and I have been digging in the archive for so many years, and usually those of you who do archival research know it's this solitary communion, but now it gets to be collective in this way. So I'm just so happy to be with you. We're gonna do a few things, but the first thing I think, so I don't just go through the roof, is to do some breathing. So I'm putting both of my feet on the granite, maybe. And I encourage you, I'm gonna put this down. I encourage you to just do whatever supports your breathing. Since we're here in the forest, we could imagine that these trees still need the carbon dioxide that we are giving them, even though they're protected by glass. So I'm gonna take 7 breaths. I'm gonna mark my inhale and my exhale. You can breathe along with me, or you could just notice your next 7 breaths. Here we go. Inhaling and exhaling. 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 One more time, inhaling. And maybe a loud exhale, letting go of everything that it took to get here. Yes, 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 yes. Okay, so speaking of the forest, I'm gonna read a very small excerpt from my aforementioned forthcoming biography, Survival is a Promise, The Eternal Life of Audre Lorde. And it is about 10 minutes, so you can let it wash over you like a meditation. You could take notes, you could do whatever feels right to you. But it starts poetically in relationship to the fact that the universe is a poet and this whole day is a poem, with an epigraph from Audre Lorde's poem, Digging. And I'll say that epigraphs from Audre Lorde have been the way that I write for many, many years, since I was 14 years old and learned there was an Audre Lorde. I have sought you in the rings around oak trees, on each of the 12 moons of Jupiter, on Harlem streets. Every tree holds an archive, concentric layers of evidence, proof of how the tree moved past its limits and grew. But the limits are there. You can read the record of the early freeze, the drought, the fungus, the hungry beetles. Every tree holds an archive of its own survival. But to see the record, you have to cut it down. Tree roots store and pass information. In Audre's archive, she kept the writings and articles of the people whose work was a part of the climate that made her feel possible and sometimes impossible. Other people's archival papers show the cards and monetary support Audre sent unasked so often without expectation of repayment. And her archive shows ample evidence of the value of her layers for the forest of Black women writers that she helped grow. Audre believed in the integrity of her skin. She also worried about cancer research at the time that said incisions could provoke and encourage cancerous cells and impede the efforts of healing cells to regenerate. So she resisted the dominant oncological impulse to cut her open as much as she could. But after reading and researching and consulting with her loved ones, she consented to a mastectomy of her right breast. The staff and volunteers at the hospital fully expected her to stuff her bra or wear a prosthetic breast so she and everyone else could pretend nothing had happened. Audre did the opposite. Not only did she refuse to wear a stuffed bra, she made asymmetrical necklaces to highlight her evolution. That archive of survival, she wore it on her chest. What we call a tree is mostly dead matter. Bark is dead like human fingernails, protecting the thin live layer of growing cells from the outside world. The inside is already ancestral. Layers of dead wood provide the structure and scaffolding for the live parts of the plant to withstand wind, to reach for sun. Cambium, the living tree cells, build life on top of the dead that came before, hardened by time. This ancestral structure makes a tree a lot like a coral reef. At the center of all that dead wood is the pith, or medulla, the original core of the tree, a place that never stops being soft. Woodcarvers warn their students about the pith. No matter how old the tree, the core part that emerged from the seed is still vulnerable. It will fall apart under pressure. Back in 1962, in her bio for the British Sixes and Sevens anthology, Audre introduced what I call her theory of Black feminist photosynthesis. This is what she said. I was not born on a farm or in a forest, but in the center of the largest city in the world, a member of the human race hemmed in by stone, away from earth and sunlight. But what is in my blood and skin of richness, of brown earth and noon sun, and the strength to love them, comes the roundabout journey from Africa through sun islands to a stony coast. And these are the gifts through which I sing, through which I see. This is the knowledge of sun and how to love even where there is no sunlight. This is the knowledge and richness I shall give my children proudly as a strength against the less obvious forms of narrowness and night. A forest is a superorganism. Multiple species make it possible for the forests to live, grow, regenerate, to withstand storms or drought or parasites. The breathing of the forest is what makes life between oceans possible. The canopy of a forest takes in the rain that falls over land and breathes it out. A tree cannot shift the climate of the area where it grows, but a forest can. A forest is a system of mutual aid and shared resources. The roots of the trees are connected through mycelium, and uncountable species interact and thrive in a healthy forest. But not every group of trees constitutes a forest. Many groups of trees are grown for lumber or as sound barriers along the highway. In these cases, the point is not for the trees to talk to each other or to house the infinite potential of forest biodiversity. The point is for the trees to grow fast and straight for human use. Most of the large groups of trees on this continent now are not forests. They are plantations. Wood is sticky, which makes it difficult to turn it into paper. It is full of natural glue or sap, and paper pulp makers have to mix it with chemicals that make the fibers of the tree act like they don't know each other. Does something of the tree come back if we use paper to tangle ourselves together, insist on our connection stick to each other? We don't love in the abstract and we don't love in masses, Audre wrote in her journal. And so she saved specific examples of love from her networks of care, like Barbara Smith and Cherie Moraga's line-by-line edits of her prose in Zami, or Michelle Cliff and Adrienne Rich's line-by-line edits of her poems in Our Dead Behind Us. Like the care that reached Toni Cade Bambara even through the walls of the City University. Bambara wrote a letter back to Audre about Audre's tender and rigorous poem, Dear Toni, instead of a letter of congratulations for your book and your daughter who you say you are raising to be a correct little sister, Audre Lorde's longest poem title, the poem both honors Bambara as a creator and as a mother and offers a critique of what it means to raise their daughters to be correct instead of raising them to be free. Or as the poem ends, our girls will grow into their own Black women, finding their own contradictions that they will come to love as I love you. Toni Cade wrote back, I'm not even gonna pause to try and think of a really balanced way to thank you for this stunning poem. I mean stunning, so just wow, Audre. It's an amazing poem. Or the letter future poet laureate Rita Dove sent about her anxiety as the only Black person in her creative writing MFA at University of Iowa. She reached out to Audre because she felt like she was not getting any useful feedback in workshop to nurture her poetry about Black life. Or, one of my favorites, the letter of gratitude on elephant stationery from Bell Hooks for Audre's talk at National Women's Studies Association in 1981 about the uses of anger. The memory of your voice, warm and strong, was like a blanket I wrapped myself in all the way home, Bell wrote. Or the letters where other writers celebrate the achievement of Audre's kids or ask how they're doing. Or the letter where Sonia Sanchez encourages her dear sister Audre to take her vitamins. In her journal, Audre writes, look how you print yourself on my heart. Okay, so that's the meditation. You don't clap. Just take another deep breath, inhaling and exhaling. Okay, now is the fun part. So there are the materials that we have on view here, and then there are the materials that are here with us that are not on view. We're activating all of it as an oracle. And you'll see how an oracle works. All I can tell you is an oracle always works. It has some important ingredients, one of which is our breathing, which we already activated and practiced. Another one of those key ingredients is called dedication. So this is an opportunity to dedicate your participation in the rest of this hour that we have to someone who's not in here with us, that you know of, and they could be someone older than you, or they could be younger than you. They could be someone who's living now. They could be someone who lived before. They could be someone of any species. Just not you, and not anyone else who's in this space. I'm dedicating my participation to my niece, Penny. Penny's for Penelope. She's 5, and she's the greatest footballer in the world. She really is. I don't know how to show you that. You have to just see it. But, and she's just like, she has a strong energy, and she has full access to her refusal. Wouldn't you say her grandmother, my mom, is here? Full access to her refusal. And I think that's something that I really hope that the legacy of Audre Lorde and all the work that we do inspired by Audre Lorde can continue to nurture in her and in all our other fierce 5-year-olds and people of all ages. So that's an example of a dedication. And now you get to dedicate. Turn to your neighbor and let them know who you're dedicating to, a little bit about why. We're gonna take a minute and a half. Go. Oh, okay, you done. So Please thank your partner. Thank you for your dedication. It's so important. And I feel like we're always bringing folks into the space with us in any space that we come into. So thank you for the layering of the space. Listen, one of your people up here? Okay, I was like, did one of you really manifest your person and they just dropped down behind me? Like, let me know, because as I said, I don't know how it works, but it works. Okay, so now we have everything we need except your Lordean question. So one of the reasons that Audre Lorde is so important to me as a poet is because of what her beliefs were about the function of poetry. And she really felt like her poetry was about giving people access to a different emotional reality, and therefore recognizing that they had the strength to create another material reality. That's one way to say it. I've been trying to say it a lot of different ways, you'll see in what is a very long biography that hopefully you all will read. But that's one way of saying it that feels true. And so a Lordean question, in the way that I think about it, is that type of question that could make your voice shake. It's the question that is really vibrating in the area of your life where you're having a breakthrough right now. It might feel like a breakdown that you're having in that area of your life, but I'll just say it's a breakthrough in its process. And I believe we're all having a breakthrough in some area of our life right now. And what if we could ask Audre Lorde about it? You're like, what if we could sit with Audre Lorde? This is basically the theme of my life. What if I could sit with Audre Lorde? And these are the ceremonies where it becomes close. So think about your Lordean question. You don't have to turn to your neighbor and say it, but think about what it might be. Oh, what's my Lordean question? My Lordean question is, what do I need to remember in order to be able to stop, like really stop and pause? What do I need to remember to be able to do that? Not just know that it's a good idea to rest, but actually to significantly pause in my life. So it's that type of question. It's a question like you really don't know the answer to. It's different probably from most of the questions that happen in academic spaces, which are, not really questions, and usually about something that you feel confident enough about that you're willing to speak about it in public in this place. So there's a vulnerability to the Lordean question that is really key. But nobody has to share their question. It's a fully voluntary moment. And if you all share, we don't have time for you all to share your questions anyway. But it too doesn't have to be in the form of a question. It could just be an area of inquiry in your life. Okay? Okay, so you're gonna find your Lordean question, or one of your Lordean questions, and then you're going to choose a number between 1 and 16. Could be your favorite number, could be related in some way to your question. It should be a whole number. I know I have to say that. In some spaces I have to be like a whole number because there's infinite numbers. I know there's infinite numbers between zero, anyway. But between 1 and 16, a whole number. And then one of you will go first, and you'll say your Lordean question as specifically or as vaguely as you feel like saying it in this space, and you'll say the number that you chose, and that will direct me to the artifact that we're going to talk about first. Or none of you will do it, and we'll just sit here. But no pressure. Who wants to go first? Hello.
I would like to know from Ms. Audre Lorde, where does she find her strength, and where does that come from, and where did it go, where is it going, where is it ruminating?
Absolutely. And so in the technology of the Lordian question, we make it really personal. And I know why you're asking this question, but can you say why this is important to you to know about Audre Lorde's strength?
Because I have a postcard that was given to me by Colin Farley. And
Yeah.
it says, Miss Audre, with her hands up in the air in glory in 1960 with a purple long dress on stage. And it's just so strong to me. And I want to find that strength to be able to do that.
Beautiful. And it sits on your desk.
Yeah.
This is DG, Windham-Campbell prize-winning poet, who of course asked the first question. Okay, so the fourth artifact that I pulled. Wow. Okay, so this is not in the case. It is a celebration of life for Audre Lorde that happened at Modern Times Bookstore in San Francisco. And it is, it's part of Lisbeth Tellefson's collection that is here. And it's amazing because DG, the photo that's on here, if I'm understanding the photo that you saw, it's the same day that it was taken by the same photographer. So that's why I'm like, what? But you know, the oracle always works. So we know this. And so what I want to share with you is that this memorial service, there's a video of it that I was blessed to be able to watch. And there's a few things there. There were a lot of people who testified to the strength that Audre Lorde offered them, including Merle Wu, who shared about how Audre wrote to check in about her. While she was having her own, Audre was having her own journey with cancer, she was writing to check in with Merle about her journey with cancer. And she talked about how our survival is our resistance in the specificity of supporting each other through the everyday survival process of what they were going through. And so there's strength in that sisterhood, right, that Audre Lorde really emphasized. And then there's also, this strength beyond her lifetime that showed up at this memorial service, because Cherie Moraga got up and she said that even after her passing, Audre Lorde has brought together feminists of color who haven't been speaking to each other for decades and didn't want to speak to each other, but here they are all in this bookstore realizing that they need each other's strength, right? So I don't know what Audre Lorde would say. I wish she was here. It would be so great to have her here at 89 years old to just tell us what we want to know. And I think that that collectivity and that support of each other, even when it's difficult, even when I can't even tell you about all the conflicts and the drama that happened between the people who all love Audre Lorde. But across that, understanding that we need each other for our strength. Thank you for that beautiful question, and thank you for starting. Awesome. That's how it's done. That's how it works. So I see your hand. Oh, one second. There's also a microphone, right? Sorry for making you project so loud, DD. I forgot to remind them about the microphone.
My question is, did you realize when you were working that it would be so empowering, such an empowering legacy through ages? And my number is 13.
Yeah. So again, the technology of the Lordian question is, this is a question for you about you that you would love to have for your own life. The question you asked is very easy, yes. But could you say maybe, and maybe it has to do with maybe legacy is an area of breakthrough that you're in, or how it relates to an area of breakthrough that you're in, or what you want towards whatever that breakthrough is, even if you keep it a secret, because I love for you to stay mysterious, but I also want to stay true to the technology.
Yes, it is a question I'm posing to myself right
Around legacy through the ages?
now. Yes.
Yes. And you said 13?
13, yes.
13, okay. So for your legacy through the ages. Yes, the question was about legacy through the ages. The question in its first form was, did I know when I started embarking on this project that her legacy would be so impactful through the ages? I'm a witness and a whole testimony and a living proof of the impact of Audre Lorde's legacy through the ages. So I definitely knew that. And I feel very, very accountable to being part of how that continues for other generations. But since it's about you and your legacy, this is so interesting. So this is one of the letters. It's not a letter that's in here, but it's part of Audre Lorde's correspondence with Langston Hughes. And it's about her insistence on her legacy, even as a young poet. So, which she knew about. Like, from when she was 12 years old, she was like, I want a legacy that lives on after me. This was something she was very clear about. This is not something that happened accidentally. This was definitely her intention. But in this moment, Audre Lorde has written to Langston Hughes. He has invited her to submit poems for an anthology he's creating. And she sent the poems, and he said which ones he likes, but he also complained in his letter, which I think is the letter that's there. He complained about university presses and how they don't want to publish poets that haven't been published before, and he's in this process and he's complaining to her. She reads it as that he's not going to publish her poems because she hasn't been published before. And even though she really holds Langston Hughes up as who he is, the dean of Black poetry, she wants to insist that her poems be included. So this is what she says. I'm excerpting. Thank you for your letter. I'm rather disappointed at not being included in the proposed anthology, which isn't true. She really was included, but she was afraid she wasn't going to be included. Since the reason seems to be not a question of quality, I feel honored that a few met with your approval. I sincerely hope you enjoyed reading them. However, concerning the blessing, so he's saying that they want to publish poems that have already received the blessing of publication. She then says other things that she's done. She says she was co-editor of her, she was editor-in-chief of her college literary magazine, parentheses, which really was the best in the country. So humble, Audre Lorde. Anyway, and she goes on to say, and how are poets, Negro and otherwise, young and old, sharing only anonymity and the desire to say those things they feel must be said, how are they ever to be blessed if their readiness is to be measured by previous blessing? I feel like this is really audacious. And then I think she understands that because she's like, at this point I must ask forgiveness for my importunate rambling, but I would like, and she's basically, you can see that she's going back and forth around this because she writes this whole letter, she goes back and forth, she's like, I really appreciate you, I'm sorry for saying this, but what the heck, my poems really should be published, and then which is all typed, and then she handwrites, and she's like, I'm sorry for my informality, so you see this like eager young poet who so wants to be published, and especially by somebody who she admires so much, and but doesn't want to burn the bridge or, like that thing. I don't know if anybody's ever felt that. And it's because she's insisting on her legacy. It's like she knows that she has to be there. I take it personally. Like she knew that she had to be there for me, for us. And it was like, nothing should get in the way of that. Not even Langston Hughes. But then Langston Hughes also is the door through which it's supposed to happen, right? That tension that's there. And so it makes me think about, in relationship to your legacy, what is that? What is that place where it's like, that you need to insist and that you need to take bold action, but you also don't want to take destructive action towards the forwarding of your own legacy.
So is this working?
Yeah,
Oh.
yeah.
So 4 years ago I started Elm City Lit Fest, which is a celebration of literature of the African diaspora.
Yay, Lit Fest!
In New Haven. And yeah, so and I started it for legacy.
That's
And
right.
there have been times that I was like, why am I doing this in this town? And it's 4 years later, and we're planning for the 5th year. So
Excellent.
Thank
That's wonderful. Thank you. So y'all getting it? You got the next one? Yes.
My Lordian question is, let's say you're going through a moment of crisis. What is the mixture of vulnerability and strength that is good to share with people around you as you're going through this crisis or breakthrough? And my number is 1.
What a great question. Yes. Everybody heard that question? What if hypothetically one was going through a crisis? What is the mixture of strength and vulnerability to share with other people as you move through this breakthrough? Yeah? Yeah, and the number was 1. Anybody else choose 1? You guys didn't choose any number. Okay, that's okay. You're gonna come up with it at the last minute, just like all great students. Oh, this is so good. This is so good. Everyone's intuition is so amazing. Okay, so this is one of the poems that Langston Hughes loved, that Audre Lorde sent, and it is in here as Yearstone. And Yearstone is a poem that was never published by that title. It was published first as If You Come Softly, and then it was republished as Memorial 1. And it's a poem that Audre Lorde wrote during the year anniversary of her best friend from high school's death by suicide. And she never stopped writing. Her name was Genevieve. She never stopped writing poems to Genevieve. Genevieve shows up majorly in Zami, as folks who read Zami know. And for Audre Lorde, what was at stake in her commitment to sharing the life-saving words that she would share was Genevieve, like the life she should have saved in a certain sense, and which means that she saved my life for Genevieve. So this is, and it becomes Memorial 1 because there are memorial poems that she continues to write for the rest of her life to Genevieve as an audience. The major difference between, other than the title, between the poem as she sent it to Langston Hughes and as it appears here, and the poem as she published it eventually, is that it becomes If You Come Softly. So if you come softly as wind within the trees, you may hear as I hear, see what sorrow sees. And there's this great video of Audre Lorde at the end of her life reciting lines from this poem, and she's just like tickled. She's like, such beautiful lyrics, once again humble, just such beautiful lyrics, and you see this like girlishness in her of the girl she was, loving the girl who died. But here, instead of if you come softly, it's should you come so softly. Should you come so softly as wind within the trees? Should you come so lightly as threading drops of dew? And so, what is the difference between should and if you, right? When we think about your question, the strength and vulnerability. Should. It's very close. If you should. It's, subjunctive in its own way. But what is the difference in possibility between if and should? Right? And so I think that in relationship to a crisis, it's also a breakthrough. What is that subtle difference between, I'll speak for myself, the judgment, the should, the attachment, and the if, like the possibilities that come out of this crisis and this breakthrough that I'm in? Could I give myself space to be possible and say, well, what if this were to happen? Yeah. So, yeah, that's one. Thank you for that question. I see someone back there, and I see someone back there.
Hello.
Hello.
My question, my Lordian question is, how can I soften into trust and connection to life?
What a beautiful Lordian question.
And my number is 11, so.
Say it again. Say that question again loud so everybody can hear it.
Okay. How can I soften into trust and connection to life?
So good. And what number did you say?
11.
Perfect. So 11. Eleven is the first letter that, well, the letter that Audre Lorde wrote to Langston Hughes where she enclosed the poems. And it's really short, and it says, "Dear Langston," which changes to Mr. Hughes because he's saying Miss Lorde. So, you know, sometimes you assume different intimacy than the other person assumed. Dear Langston, here are the poems you so kindly offered to consider. I'm sorry for the time gap between your letter and my response, but with my thesis and exams, this past month has assumed the major proportions of a badly written spy thriller. So, yeah. And then she asks, how long is he gonna hold the poems? Because, you know, she on her hustle, like she's gonna send them to somebody else if he doesn't publish them. So that's the, that's the artifact. It's, to me, doesn't read as particularly soft. You know, there's like a hardness in it. There's a eagerness and urgency in it. There's certainly a desire for connection, but like, there's even a judgment of the spy thriller that her life has been. Like, it's gotta be a badly written spy thriller, you know what I'm saying? But anyway, so there's like that energy that I identify with knowing the power of your critical mind and really going with the power of that criticality, which I definitely relate to. And then there's something that comes after that, where beyond all the critique, there is the creation and the trust and the surrender. And it's interesting because Audre Lorde talks about coming into really that stage of her life relatively late in life, in the timescape of her, unfortunately, as Melissa was saying, short adult life, when she turned 40. And she was like, surrender. And then she started to say she was a high priestess of 40 because she was like, oh, this is so good. I have so much more energy because I'm not judging myself all the time and trying to manipulate situations and make things happen. Like I'm actually surrendering, I'm softening to connect with life, like your question. And that's the portrait we get here, right? This is like the soft Audre, lean back, shirt open at the chest, offering love and advice to the Ashe collective in this way that is in a totally different form of flow. And so I don't think you actually have to turn 40 to do that. I will say I did recently also turn 40, and it did make a big difference, and I do feel like surrender and power. And so it's really great to honor people who are 40 and over. But I think that maybe something that can provide this is mentorship, you do see a softening through this correspondence with Langston Hughes, who's like, calm down. Didn't even reject the poems yet. It's gonna be okay, you know, like, and like, really that he believed in her career beyond this particular anthology, right? That the scope that he was able to have as the mentor figure in this case became the scope that she offered to so many people, maybe some people in this room, literally, who may have gotten to meet her and work with her, certainly for those of us who have been mentored by her body of work. So I think that there's, again, a difficulty of having that softness when we feel isolated and when we feel like as an urgent individual we got to make things happen. And there's something that happens when, especially I would say, in intergenerational collaboration, and that could go in multiple directions, because part of the reason that I dedicated to Penny is because when I think about Windham-Campbell award-winning poet Alexis Pauline Gumbs sitting up here to tell you about Audre Lorde, there's that. But when I think about Penny's auntie sitting up here to invite you into the world that Penny deserves, that's the softer version that has the connection to life, that is the more powerful choice. So dedication too, like what we just did. I wasn't trying to necessarily soften you all up. But I want that part of you that's connected to that person that you love, that you brought. And I think that that is part of the ecology and the Black feminist photosynthesis that Audre Lorde teaches. These are so good.
That
Okay,
was
I think we only
beautiful.
have
Thank you.
9 more minutes. Was someone else sharing their question? Several people over here. Okay, so we're just going to do as many as we can. And if you aren't going to raise your hand, you should still think of a number because it's going to still work. I don't make the rules. I just enforce the technology.
Hi. Thank you so much for being here and for sharing
Thank
all of
you.
this with us. My question is, when I feel so pulled in so many different directions at once, and the feelings that are pulling me in those directions include desire, include fear, include wanting to control, include wanting to surrender.
Yep.
How do yeah. How do I just get really, how can I really hear and really listen? And how can I quiet down enough to really listen? But yeah, okay, sorry to edit it in real time.
No, you got
too.
it's a Lordian question. You still figuring it out.
I'm also, it's intertwined with the question of like, once I let go of this is how my life has to be and this is what I'm striving towards and this is what I'm moving towards, I enter this space of like, oh, so perhaps nothing is really that real or tangible, or like, okay, so there's nothing to really hold on to, and that's supposed to be freeing, but it's also actually very scary, because then how do you make choices? How do you move forward if you've already surrendered the idea that like there's a right way to do this? Then what do you do? So that's my question in many forms, and my number is 9.
Great. It's a
Thank
very
you.
relatable question. 9. Oh, wow. So 9 is a letter that Ashe, and I don't know if Melissa mentioned, you can see the cover of one of the issues of Ashe across the way in the case over here in that corner. And it actually quotes Audre Lorde's essay, Eye to Eye, Black Women, Hatred, and Anger, which is my favorite essay by Audre Lorde, at a little bit of length. But on November 5th, 1989, Ashe sent out a call to their readers to support Audre and to support her community in St. Croix, who were surviving the aftermath of Hurricane Hugo. And it was a devastating hurricane. It was responded to in a lot of the ways that those of us who remember Katrina, it was similar. There was a focus on protecting property at the expense of the population. There was a criminalization of the Black population that was there. There were property grabs, all sorts of things that should have taught us not to respond to Katrina in the way that we did. So there was this huge outpouring of support. And so this is an incredible example of how the portals are open on multiple sides, right? This is a community that felt like I felt. You know, I start with the Audre Lorde epigraphs in all my essays that I wrote since high school and to this very thing I read today. They are quoting Audre Lorde all of the time, and they really value her mentorship and her blessing of Ashe as a project that she loved and thought was so important. We might not get to this artifact, but she also sent letters created a fundraising letter for people to support Ashe, because she and they knew that her asking for it and saying this is what we need to do to support Black lesbian feminism would resonate in a particular way. And then she is in St. Croix, power is down for months, the supplies are really scarce, and people are being expatriated back to the mainland, and Audre understands herself to be a local at this point. Like, she's committed, she lives in St. Croix. And so all of these people send supplies, tarps, sleeping bags, like really important material goods to Audre, but it ends up really being to the whole community. And these are things that are distributed in life-saving ways. So when I think about your question of what's the materiality, what's the surrender, Audre Lorde theorizes this hurricane, Hugo, and by the way, that image is of, well, my copy of Hell Under God's Orders, which is a book that Dr. Gloria Joseph and Hortense Rao and Audre Lorde created together, and they created a press called Winds of Change Press in order to publish it. And that's actually one of their copies that Dr. Joseph sent me, that I took a picture of, to send to Melissa to have in the case. And it's a treasure, and it's out of print, but it should be back in print in case there are publishers in here who want to rectify that. What Audre Lorde says is about surrender on a species scale. So she writes this letter called Hugo Letter that's included in this book, and she says it's the social disaster that's the most harmful. She talks about capitalism as a cancer. Metaphor of cancer is not a lightly used metaphor for Audre Lorde, who is surviving cancer and has had 2 tumors on her liver recurring at the time that she's surviving this hurricane. And she says, we build our structures, to say this inside the Beinecke is something. Thank you, Audre. We build our structures as if they will last 1,000 years, but wind is our teacher. Okay, that's a mic drop from Audre in the beyond, right? And so as she's surviving this hurricane, she's saying we all need to actually surrender to the wind. The press is called Winds of Change. Audre Lorde is acknowledging herself as a daughter of Oya, goddess of change, goddess of the winds in the Yoruba cosmology. And for her she writes about going back out into her community after the storm and looking at the wreckage and seeing, she says it's like looking in the mirror after you've survived a near fatal disease. And she is somebody who looks in the mirror as somebody surviving ultimately a fatal disease. She understands that there's not a separation between the evolutionary surrender that she has to have in relationship to her own existence and what is happening in terms of our scale of caring for each other as a species. And so the fact that this small example of a community of support doing what the government of the United States, which had colonized St. Croix, did not do, and prioritizing the needs of the people and sending them the supplies and allowing them to survive that, is an example of, I think, Audre Lorde's idea of surrendering to what is the actual natural flow, what is the actual natural process that finds us when we could have had no way of knowing. She didn't write what she wrote so then a bunch of younger women would be excited so that then they would create supplies for then when she was going to survive a hurricane, right? That wasn't a plan. That was an outgrowth of her surrender to her purpose.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Well, I went on at length and now it's 6:30. So sorry for the folks who didn't get to share their questions yet, but I just want to thank everyone. I want to especially thank Melissa for making all these materials available to me. There are words in this letter that the first page of it is here, this letter that Audre Lorde writes about our climate and about what it means to be out of right relationship with the earth and what it takes to get back into right relationship with the earth, that caused me to make a last minute change in the biography because I was like, this is where she says it the most clearly. And so this is a really important aspect of her legacy. I definitely encourage you to peruse this, but also to come back here and go through the full file, because you got to see the whole conversation between Langston Hughes and Audre Lorde. She ends up sending, when she gives birth to her daughter, she ends up sending a baby announcement to him. Like their relationship becomes much more than like, can I please get published, right? And to see the mentorship between Lisbeth and the Ashe Collective and Audre Lorde at that other end of her life is a really beautiful thing to see too. So thank you for being here, and more soon.